Coming up on Tech News Weekly, it's me and Mikah Sargent. We're joined by Harry McCracken from Fast Company. He has the new Microsoft Surface Duo device and shares his thoughts after a week with it. Also, Joseph Cox from Vice got the inside scoop on a secret Russian SIM that has criminal intent. We also talk about how Apple has its own subscription bundles reportedly in the works and how that might compare to other companies like Amazon. And Epic Games makes a big move bypassing Apple and Google's app stores for in-app payments, and they may be paying the price for it. Is this going to increase antitrust scrutiny? All that and more coming up next on Tech News Weekly. Tech News Weekly is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Securing every access point in your company doesn't have to be a challenge. LastPass unifies access and authentication to make securing your employees simple and secure, even when they're working remotely. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 146, recorded Thursday, August 13th, 2020.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by LastPass. Allow your remote workforce the ability to do their best work without jumping through hoops. Ensure your business's security with LastPass. Visit lastpass.com/twit to find out how they can help you.
And by Casper. Casper is a sleep brand that makes expertly designed products to help you get your best rest one night at a time. Get $100 towards select mattresses by visiting casper.com/twit1 and using promo code twit1 at checkout.
And by IT Pro TV, get the best well-rounded IT education from the experts. Visit itpro.tv/TNW for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription and use code TNW30 at checkout. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am Mikah Sargent.
Hello, Mikah Sargent. Nice to meet you. I'm Jason Howell.
Oh, so nice to meet you too, sir. Very well. Very good.
Good to see you, man. And good to see our first guest here. Very interested about this topic here. Microsoft has finally announced that its dual screen Android device, the Surface Duo, is going to release on September 10th. That is one day ahead of my birthday. So if anyone wants to get me a gift, you know what to get me. It's priced like a premium Android smartphone. It starts at $1,399. That's $1,399. And it's a Surface device through and through, even though it's running Android, of course. Joining us to talk about his time with the pre-release version of the hardware, how it works into Microsoft's mobile strategy, and a whole lot more is Harry McCracken from Fast Company. Harry, it's been a while. It's good to see you.
Hey, folks. Great to be here.
Great to have you on. Thank you for taking time with us, especially because you had some time with a device that I feel like a lot of people have been talking about this past year, at least since Microsoft kind of announced this way back when, last year sometime, I think maybe midway through last year. So it's been a while. Let's start with the hardware itself. For those who aren't familiar, this is the Surface Duo. What is Microsoft set to release when this hardware comes out? Who is it designed for? What's your take on that?
Well, after having used it for about a week and a half and talked to Panos Panay, the Surface chief, and Satya Nadella about it, it's essentially, it's a two. I mean, on the most obvious level, it's a two-screened Android phone. But really, what Microsoft wanted to build was a great device to run Office and Microsoft 365, and in general, the Microsoft suite of productivity apps. So it's a smartphone design with productivity front and center in a way that it is not usually with smartphones.
So it's a dual screen device. We're seeing a lot of foldables right now. Foldable seems to be a thing that started catching some steam, or at least some attention last year, even though they're usually pretty darn expensive. Some foldables have an actual foldable screen. This goes the route of having kind of the seam in the middle with, from what I understand, a pretty interesting hinge design to fold it around. It kind of reminds me in some ways, this is the LG Velvet, and of course LG on their V60 and the LG Velvet, they have this case that adds a second screen. So I guess in some ways it's similar to this, which has me wondering, like, what is the Surface Duo in your experience with the device? What is it going to do better than, say, an LG Velvet that has a dual screen attachment that allows you to do dual screen stuff?
Yeah, by not using folding screen technology, Microsoft avoided the fact that that's kind of a bleeding edge technology. And the big catch with doing two screens, and I'm trying to hold it up in front of my camera. There we go.
There you go.
Wow.
The big catch with using two screens rather than one folding screen is you do get that line up the middle. And so they did take that into consideration. And if you take an app like the Office app and span it across both screens, it reconfigures itself basically to in a way that's useful and avoids the line down the middle. So you have, like, in Word, you have your list of documents down one side, and on the other side, you have your document itself. And the fact there's a line up the middle is not a problem. With non-Microsoft apps, if you span it across both screens right now, sometimes it's an issue because you get like an obstructed view of your own document. But Microsoft is working with third-party developers, and hopefully at least some of them will design their apps with the Duo and two screens in mind. I'd say in general, how it's better than past attempts at two screens is that Microsoft did a really good job with the hinge. From all those Surfaces with their kickstands, they have lots of experience with hinges, and this device folds really nicely. It's a 180-degree hinge, so you can swing it all the way back. You can lie it flat. You can use it like a tiny laptop where one screen is up and the other screen is your keyboard. And so just in general, the two-screen aspect of it is really nicely done.
And Harry, you just, I believe you held it up. I was under the impression that you didn't have this device anymore. So is that the Surface Duo that you have in your hands, or is that like I
have the Surface Duo. I do need to send it back at some point, but at the moment, still got it.
Yeah, hold it back forward. I really want to take a look at this and see just kind of the size of it in your hands.
Yeah, okay, it's not as big as I thought.
There we go. There we go.
It's what it is it's quite wide. Like, I couldn't put it in my shirt pocket. Jeans pocket is okay, and it is really thin. When it's folded, you fold it flat, it's super thin. It's thinner than other smartphones.
Oh, wow.
And when you fold it up, it's thicker than a smartphone, but it's still, I'd say, surprisingly thin. It's nowhere near twice as thick as a smartphone, and it's thinner than something like the Galaxy Fold. So the width is unusual, and they did the width basically because they wanted to have each screen be a little bit like a laptop screen, which is kind of what you want for productivity. Smartphones have gotten bigger. They've really kind of emphasized height over width, and this is both wide and tall, which is kind of what you want if you're using Word or Excel or doing something like doing Microsoft Teams on one of the screens and checking out your OneNote notes on the other one. It's really kind of like a dual monitor setup on your desktop, but in a smaller size.
All right, so people are getting pretty excited about this. Now, you mentioned in your piece that the hardware obviously is very intriguing. The software you mentioned is kind of buggy. This is pre-release software that's on here. Microsoft did have an earlier, a potentially earlier release date. They've bumped that back to September 10th. You posited in the piece that, that gives them time at least to address some of these software issues. But given that this is kind of beta software, let's say, were you able to get enough of a sense of the software to know its potential once all of these bugs are addressed? Like, what does it go above and beyond, and does it satisfy what you were looking for?
Yeah, I mean, basically being able to use two apps at once on a smartphone is really nice. Generally speaking, with conventional smartphones, either you can't do that, or there have been some attempts at doing it kind of like Samsung has a mode where you can pull up two apps, but it's still on one screen. So it's two extremely small apps at one time. And with the Surface, you really can pull up two apps at once. It's great for something like if you're writing something in Word, but want to do your research in the browser. You can have both of those at a larger size than on any other phone, given that even the single individual screens are really large. And as I said, with the Microsoft apps, you can get this kind of a jumbotron effect where you're spanning one app across both screens. And as long as an app has been designed with that in consideration, that's really nice too.
Yeah, and I feel like that part is pretty critical because, I mean, I remember, God, it must have been like 2012. There was a Sony Tablet P. It's always the one that I refer to when we talk about foldables because that was a really old foldable, and it did the design, the like hinge design in the middle, split the screen into two. Didn't quite have the ability, if I remember correctly, to take content and put it just on one screen versus the other. And if it did, it was probably just some, a handful of built-in app. That's it right there. So I guess looking at it, they are able to do it in some ways, but I felt like in my time playing with it, most everything that I wanted to do with it kind of stretched across these two screens, and that seam just ended up being kind of a challenge to work around. So I think having some sort of added compatibility baked into it, so that apps can kind of morph and play with that screen real estate is really important. And of course, this is a Microsoft device. People who are getting this are probably all in on Microsoft ecosystem to begin with. So they're going to be pretty happy with what Microsoft is offering, let alone any other developers. Would you agree with that?
Well, they really are catering to people who, in a lot of cases, are Surface fans, and also are people who do live in the Microsoft apps. So if you're a Microsoft person, you're probably going to be way happier with this out of the box than if you're using Gmail and Google Docs and so forth. Google would have to build better support for that experience to be as good as the Microsoft experience is already. And as I mentioned, I did find quite a few bugs, so that's a little bit of a concern. But as long as what Microsoft ships is a little bit more reliable than what I did conceptually, they did a very good job of figuring out how to build a good two-screen device from a hardware standpoint, and also figuring out kind of the tools and features you want to make it work well on the software side. You can also pair two apps so that if you always want Word and the Edge browser to pop up as a pair, you can do that, which is nicely done. And that's the kind of thing that I wish the iPad had.
Right. And this is launching, of course, with Android 10. I imagine, hopefully Microsoft is quick enough on the upgrade to 11 once Android 11 comes out in who knows when, but probably next month or very soon after that. And I do know that Android 11 has expanded support for dual screen devices. So, it all seems to be coming together at about the same time. I have to imagine that's going to benefit the Duo as a result. Now, speaking of hardware, it does make some trade-offs, and people are very quick to kind of point to this, especially tech enthusiasts who are so specs driven. It's easy to look at this and be like, oh, wait a minute, the processor is a year old. There's no 5G. There's no NFC if you want to use this for mobile payments. Do you think Microsoft chose these sacrifices appropriately, like well enough, or in your time using it, were you like, I know they did this to save on cost or whatever their reasons were, but I do really wish it was here, like it's lacking without it?
Yeah, I mean, they really focused on the stuff they cared about and ignored the stuff they didn't. So it's a very different device in terms of the emphasis from any other smartphone out there. I'd say the one thing that if I were to use this as my main phone that might bug me on an ongoing basis is it feels like it's not going to be great as a photography phone. It has one camera, and it's in front-facing mode for video calls, which, because this is a productivity device, is important. It seems fine, and you can flip the phone around and use that as a rear-facing camera as well. But it's just one camera. It's 11 megapixels. It's just not kind of as natural as what you can do with most smartphones, where you can pull them out of your pocket and be ready to shoot really quickly. So that's kind of is the one major thing standing in my way. And I could probably live without Google Pay, even though I do like Google Pay. And I like wireless charging too, but I could probably sacrifice that. So it'll be interesting to see whether that's an obstacle, and whether at one point, if Microsoft sticks with this and there is like a Surface Duo 2, whether they start to bring back some of that functionality they sacrificed in this one. Yeah, it's really thin too, partially because other smartphones have camera bumps, and that's what lets them have 3 or 4 cameras. And Microsoft just gave that up to build the device they wanted to build. Okay.
And that makes sense. I mean, the thinness of this, especially considering the fact that it's kind of a wider device, that thinness is going to help make up for that. So I think that's a perfectly reasonable trade-off or expectation to say, hey, if you're getting this, you're getting it more for productivity than you are for a masterful photography, when you're out about in the world, as long as it's serviceable enough.
Yeah, I mean, you could theoretically have a smartphone and this. It would be pretty pricey given that this is a $1,400 device. But there have been other instances throughout history where people have had like two phones. Remember, back in the day, people would have a BlackBerry and a personal phone. So it's not entirely out of the question that some people might be excited about this and not so excited about giving up some stuff and having a phone they use all the time, and this, which is kind of a significant part of their workday, but not their only device that can make a phone call.
Sure. Now, ultimately, Microsoft decided, and this is my last question here, decided to move forward with the Duo, of course, in this very interesting time that we're in. Perhaps, you could argue that right now is not the time that this device was designed with in mind. Of course, nothing was designed with this moment in mind, but they are moving forward with the Duo, but they've postponed the Neo indefinitely. That's the Windows device, the foldable device. What does that decision tell you about Microsoft's thinking as far as these two devices are concerned, that they would continue on with this mobile version, but not the larger Windows version?
Yeah, I mean, they've been a little bit vague about why they postponed it, other than to say that they have other priorities right now. And it sounds like part of it is that, they are working on this version of Windows 10 that's optimized for two screens. And that sounds like a large project in and of itself. And my assumption is they need some more time to get that right. And without that new version of Windows, then the Neo doesn't make sense. That's a device, because it has these larger screens and runs Windows, that it's probably not competing with your phone for your attention. It's really more of, for some people, it might be a primary laptop, and for others, it's competing with something like the iPad or an Android tablet, as you probably have your laptop, and then you have a tablet, which would be the Neo. Yeah.
And let's be real, it's probably competing with the iPad because, Android tablets aren't really commanding much of the marketplace as far as
there are some nice Android tablets, and Samsung certainly makes some good ones, but
sure.
It's Samsung seems more excited about it than actual tablet users.
Yep. Absolutely agree. Harry McCracken. Harry, it's always a pleasure getting you on. Thank you so much for carving out some time for us. Harry writes for Fast Company. So check out his piece on the many sides of Microsoft's Surface Duo. Excellent article and a lot to learn. Harry, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Anytime, folks.
All right. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Alrighty.
And up next, Apple is reportedly getting into the bundle business. More on that in a moment. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by LastPass. You've heard of LastPass. When LastPass surveyed global IT decision makers, 96% of organizations said their remote workforce has impacted their identity and access management strategy. 96%. How can you manage identities and promote good security behaviors while your employees are remote? Well, you can do that with LastPass, because LastPass allows for secure password storage by giving employees their own vault for storing every app and web login they use, convenient password sharing, which makes it easy for employees to share logins while keeping access to corporate data safe, streamlined logins to capture and fill every credential without disrupting an employee's workflow, centralized control to enforce policies and get actionable insights into employee password behavior from an admin dashboard, simplified user management, which instantly adds and removes users or automates user management with directory integration, and you can access it from anywhere. No matter where the employees are working, they always have their passwords with them from any device. When user identities are centrally and securely managed, a business can ensure that the correct employee is doing the right thing and has the right access. They'll work more efficiently when they can access the data and resources they need easily. LastPass's IAM solutions help businesses improve the employee experience and safeguard from cyber threats. Of course, we use LastPass here at TWiT, both in a personal capacity and a business or corporate capacity. Having LastPass access and being able to give it out to our employees and remove or add the necessary logins whenever that's needed makes it very easy. When I joined TWiT, I got access to LastPass and was able to log into different things when I needed to instead of having to run around asking, "What's the password?" and having it, written on a card or something like that, where it could get found and used. Now, you can let your remote workforce focus on their work without compromising your business's security. Secure your remote workforce with LastPass. Go to lastpass.com/twit. That's lastpass.com/twit. Thanks so much to LastPass for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. Alrighty, folks. An interesting story that broke today. Bloomberg and Mark Gurman are reporting that Apple is working on a subscription bundles service. So I want to provide some backstory here as we dig into this. And it starts with something that I have been following for a long time. So before I came to work at TWiT, I used to work for a company called iMore. You may have heard of it. Renee Ritchie, Lori Gill. And it is... during my time there, one of the things that I often covered were Apple's earnings calls. And so if you don't know what an earnings call is, essentially the big wigs of the business hop on a call with investor strategists, and they talk about what Apple is doing, how the business is going, and then open the floor to questions about what Apple's strategy is moving forward, so that those strategists can figure out sort of what they need to tell their investors, and sort of help them with that. So I would listen to these calls, and during these calls, one of the words that came up more so than practically any other in terms of repeat words was the term services. Apple has been talking about its services business for a long time and saying that services is going to be incredibly important for Apple's future. Services include things like Apple's iCloud storage plan, Apple TV Plus, Apple News Plus, Apple Music, Apple Pay, Apple Card now, as that has come out, and some other types of not necessarily physical hardware, but the things that exist outside of that space. And if Apple services are going to be important, you have to ask why they're focusing so much on that business. And that is because the iPhone as a device is not going to continue to be this growth area for the company. Only so many people want to have iPhones, and at some point, those people will have iPhones, and then Apple can't rely on that to continue to make a profit. So it needs to look at ways that it can continually make money as frequently as possible. And one way to do that is with services. So the question becomes, how do you get more people to join these services and stick with these services? If you've got a $4.99 subscription here and a $5.99 subscription here and a $9.99 subscription here, that starts to build up. You start to get confused, and maybe you start to feel like you don't want to add more subscriptions. And that's where the bundle comes in. According to Mark Gurman, Apple is working on a bundling service called Apple One, and who knows what it'll actually be called, but that's what it's being referred to, and reportedly inside the company, that will make customers or give customers a way to subscribe to multiple services at once. So you can think of it like this: you'd get a basic package that costs X amount of dollars, and it will have Apple Music and Apple TV bundled in, Apple TV Plus bundled in. Then if you pay more, you can also add Apple Arcade to that. Then if you pay more, you might get Apple News Plus as well as the ones that come before. So it's a lot like Amazon's Prime subscription, which makes the company a good chunk of change and will offer you, you've got free shipping, you've got storage plans, you've got movies and videos and music and all these different things that you get as being a Prime member. Apple kind of wants to replicate that. And what's interesting to me, Jason, is that this is something that investors and strategists have kind of been asking Apple to do for a long time. And it kind of makes me curious. I know that you're not in the Apple game, but when you look at sort of your monthly subscriptions, do you see a benefit in kind of bundling those things together where instead of having to pay this here, this here, this here, you have one thing that covers them all? Or do you kind of like being able to pick and choose between the different services? What's your kind of take on subscription services? And I'm also curious, like, do you have subscription fatigue? Because that's one of my main concerns.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about subscription fatigue. I can see how that can kind of creep in. Like, basically, as far as my subscriptions are concerned, we've got Netflix on a recurring, monthly basis. We've got Amazon Prime on a recurring yearly basis. And then outside of that, we kind of drop into different services as we need them. So if we want to sign up for Apple Plus and check out some of their shows, we'll do that. If we want to sign up for Disney Plus, we'll do that. HBO, that sort of stuff. That seems to work fine for me. But I totally see the benefit of, and especially with Apple, because Apple is so, people are so devoted. Apple users often are very devoted to the many things that Apple does, in the same way that people are very devoted to the many things that Amazon does if you're on Prime. Although I would argue that on Prime, so many people are there specifically because of the shipping. The shipping is just a great deal. We shop all the time. Everything else is gravy. What you're talking about with Apple's offering really seems to be more like piecemeal, right? Like there is, it would be hard for me as a person who maybe wouldn't lean into Apple's subscription services too heavily. It would be hard for me to point to the one thing to be like, this is the thing that everybody's going to sign up for this for, and then everything else kind of comes along with it for the ride. I don't think that's what you're looking at here. You're really looking at more of a situation where someone is like, well, yes, I do use these three things, and oh, by the way, I signed up for Apple Arcade, so it makes sense for me to bundle that in too. Piece by piece, that makes a whole lot more sense. And if you're saving money, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. Google bundles together. I should also mention one of my other monthly subscriptions is the Google subscription for Google Play Music, almost rest in peace, which is, transitioning to YouTube Music right now. And for the past many years, the bundle there has been, my Google Home is going off. Hold on. It's listening to me. It really wants to talk right now. The bundle there has been Google Play Music, YouTube Music, ad-free YouTube all together. And really, we pay for it because of the music, but the ad-free YouTube is a pretty awesome thing when you get used to it. So there's definite value there. I totally see the value for it.
Yeah, I like what you touch on, though. The idea that for me, just having 2 or in some cases 1 day shipping was enough for me to want to be a Prime subscriber. And the fact that I get all of this other stuff with it, free shipping of Prime Now, grocery delivery, and video, Prime videos, and a free place to store photos if I want to, and a basic subscription to Amazon Music on my Echo. I mean, there's so much that gets added on, and I was just happy paying for that subscription just to get the tie-in of having faster deliveries. So that's a huge difference from what this is. And one of the things that is kind of could be possible is Apple tying hardware and these services together. And that is where I could see some potential interest, at least in my case, because if I can get an iPhone and I can get Apple Care, which is Apple's insurance subscription service, and I can get, the bundle that includes iCloud storage and all of these other things, and I pay $75 a month, and it is paying for my iPhone and all of those other things. That is the thing that makes sense to me. That is the thing that would draw me in. Now, I, as a person who covers iOS on iOS Today and Hands on iOS and all these other places, I've got to have these different subscriptions so that I can talk about the things. And so I kind of exist out of this space in the sense that any drop, if it's $5 a month that I'm going to get to save, is great. And I'm happy about that personally, but I'm trying to think of the average person who doesn't have all these subscriptions. And you're so right that I don't know. I mean, if I can get Apple Music and Apple TV Plus for the same price it's already costing me to have Apple Music, I think about my family. They are not Spotify subscribers. They're Apple Music subscribers. So easily they would, just why wouldn't you? You'd obviously pay the same price to get more than you get right now. Totally makes sense. But if you are looking at it and you're an Apple Music subscriber, but you could care less about Apple News Plus and all the other ones, I don't know. Apple is trying to like sweeten the pot for a thing that people just aren't sweet on in the first place. And I think that's going to be the struggle going forward is, can they make these services something that is of interest enough that people will want to pay more money for it? Because with Amazon, they don't need to make Prime videos that are super interesting because people are interested in getting 2 or 1 day shipping, and all this other stuff is just added to the package. That's great. So yeah, I don't know. I think this is a good idea for those of us who are already spending too much money on the different Apple services. But the idea of this is to get more people on the subscription train. And I just don't see that happening. But I mean, I don't see it happening quickly and without some big changes taking place where Apple makes this more interesting to more people. So we'll see, I guess. And yeah.
It's what comes to mind as you're kind of rounding out there is the like the cable and satellite TV subscription idea, where it's like, really, I'm paying all this money for these channels, and everything else they just kind of put in there because they need a place to to kind of sweeten the pot and everything. I'm never going to watch them. I'm never going to turn to them. So, I don't know if that's Apple News or whatever the service would be on the Apple side of things that it's like, I don't know how many of these you're going to move, but maybe if it's built into a package somewhere, that then gooses your numbers, gets your numbers up on subscriber count because it's included in some way. And maybe that satisfies something for shareholders and who knows what. For usage numbers. So yeah, Apple's smart. I think they've probably done the numbers on this, and once they release it, maybe it'll make more sense from a pricing perspective too. We'll see.
Hopefully.
All right, let's take a break and thank the sponsor. And then when we get back, we'll be talking a little bit about SIM cards that enable some interesting and very criminal things. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Casper. I'm sitting 2 feet away from a Casper bed right now. And actually, I'm also sitting, I don't know, about 20 feet away from another Casper bed. I love Casper. There's such comfortable mattresses. Its products are cleverly designed to mimic human curves, providing supportive comfort for all kinds of bodies. You spend 1/3 of your life sleeping, so you should be comfortable. I mean, really, that's the best thing, right? A nice, comfortable night of sleep, and that's what Casper offers. The original Casper mattress combines multiple supportive memory foams for a quality sleep surface with the right amount of both sink and bounce. Its breathable design helps you sleep cool and regulates your body temperature throughout the night. More than 20,000 reviews with an average of 4.8 stars across Casper, Amazon, and Google, which shows that Casper is becoming the internet's favorite mattress. Casper offers 3 other mattresses as well: the Wave, the Essential, and the Hybrid. The Wave actually features a patent-pending premium support system to mirror the natural shape of your body. The Essential is a more streamlined design at a price that's not going to keep you up at night. And the Hybrid combines the pressure relief of the award-winning foam with durable yet gentle springs. Casper also, by the way, offers a wide array of other products like pillows and sheets to ensure an overall better sleep experience. And I can just say for myself, okay, I have 2 daughters, and our bed in the master bedroom where I'm at right now. So that's 3 beds, 2 of which are the Caspers, one of which is like the mattress that we got for my our oldest daughter prior to being aware of Casper at all. And that daughter, her name is Lucy, she is always hunting for either our bed or Savannah's bed at night because her bed she finds just uncomfortable by comparison. So she also wants to be close to us. But, it's also that too. So if that speaks volumes, if you knew Lucy, then this speaks volumes for you as it does for me. You can be sure of your purchase with Casper's 100-night risk-free Sleep On It trial. Casper also offers free shipping and painless returns to the U.S. and Canada. Get a Casper mattress today, and you can save $100 towards select mattresses. Just visit casper.com/twit1 and use code twit1 at checkout. That's $100 off select mattresses by going to casper.com/twit and then the number 1 and enter code twit1 at checkout. Terms and conditions apply, and we thank Casper for their support.
Yes, thank you very much. I got to tell you, this is a fascinating bit of information, and it is all about what we call, apparently, Russian SIMs / encrypted SIMs / white SIMs. These are the secret SIMs used by criminals to spoof any number. And we have the senior staff writer for Vice, Joseph Cox, here to tell us all about them. Welcome, Joseph. Thank you for being here. Hey,
thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you writing this piece. So let's start things off. If someone were to come across the term Russian SIM or white SIM, can you give us just kind of a basic definition of what makes this SIM card unique, or what it is about this SIM card that people should know?
Sure. So, yeah, as you said, they have lots of these different names and they have lots of different capabilities. Some will spoof your number. Some will add, albeit a quite funny sort of masking to your voice. So you can have something that sounds a bit like Darth Vader, or a woman perhaps, or a child is what some of the other ones do. And then more seriously, some allow you worldwide data roaming that you can buy anonymously, so you don't, have to go to AT&T or whoever and give them your name and address. You can get these from people in the know or from shady companies. But generally speaking, these SIMs all offer some sort of security benefit, even if sometimes, it could be a little bit of theater rather than substance. But we focused on the number spoofing specifically because ordinarily, to do spoofing, you may have to have some sort of technical know-how. But with this, you pop the SIM in your phone, you type in a few digits, and you can just pretend to be anybody you want. So I can phone up and be, hey, I'm the bank, and convince someone to give me maybe their social security number. Maybe I could pretend to be Apple and say, hey, someone got into your iCloud account. Please give us your password and we can help out. So there's lots of different ways it could be used here.
Yeah, it seems like of all of the things that these SIMs can do, this is the one that would affect everyday people more often than maybe some of the other features that it offers. I'm curious, how does this SIM differ from? Because we've heard about, I think it was the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, who was at some event and they ended up spoofing his phone number in order to send a tweet from his account. And we've talked in the past when we talk about having two-factor authentication, using the SMS method of having a number sent to you via text message, that can potentially be you can have some interference there. So can you talk about how these SIMs differ from that type of technique for phishing?
So very generally speaking, an attack that a lot of people see nowadays is called SIM jacking, which is where I'll ring up Verizon, I'll ring up AT&T or whoever, give them the date of birth, maybe an SSN, and I'll pretend to be someone else. So I could phone up, say, hey, please start sending text messages to this new number or this new SIM, and then you can start receiving messages as if you're the person. The way this differs is that you sort of send messages as if you're the person. So it's only one way. You can't, totally pretend to be this person. But if I wanted to be a bank and try to scam somebody, I could do that. If I wanted to, say, blackmail somebody or do some sort of other crime, I could sort of cover my tracks by just using a random number. And the way it very generally works on a high level is that the SIM will first communicate with a private server, allegedly overseas. This is where the name Russian SIM cards come from. Other sources I spoke to said some numbers are actually from Estonia. Others, someone in the criminal world who sells these SIMs said poor countries without specifying further what exactly that means. But basically, the SIM will communicate with a server there overseas, and that server will then make the call on your behalf. So it's sort of a little hop that does that process for you. But the main difference is, yes, that you pretend to be someone on the outgoing sort of direction rather than the ingoing.
Gotcha. Now let's talk about the legality of these SIMs, because you kind of touch on the fact that inherently there's nothing illegal about the SIMs themselves. Does that mean that anyone could pick up one of these SIMs if they wanted to, and it's more about the action that you take afterward that could make it illegal?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, something that didn't get into the piece, but we definitely saw while researching, is that some of these middlemen, shady companies, they very explicitly go to pains to say on the website, hey, this protects you from the police. This can help you against law enforcement. Also, it's totally legal, so don't worry about it. And it's kind of interesting how they're trying to do both of those messages at the same time. I mean, if it's legal, why would I need to worry about the police? But yes, in and of themselves, they're not illegal. It's just a SIM card. It's just routing calls. That's all it's doing. But of course, if I go and pretend to be a bank, that's going to be fraud, maybe wire fraud charges. If I'm pretending to be Apple to get into someone's iCloud account, that could be a hacking charge. So yeah, as you suggest, it's sort of what you do with the SIMs afterwards that matters. And I suppose that, extends to all sorts of other technology. We've written about encrypted phones before and how police have targeted those, which are a little bit different. They do end-to-end encryption on the device itself. Those aren't illegal, but they're heavily used by drug traffickers, weapons traffickers, and organized criminal elements. So it's certainly how the technology is implemented and used where it actually leads to sort of the legal issues.
One of the things that surprised me in reading your article was how easy it was to come across the information regarding these SIMs. So you had YouTube videos that you saw and included some screenshots in the piece from a YouTube video showing how this works. That leads me to question, how aware is law enforcement and, the police that it's supposed to be safe from and that kind of thing? How aware are they of these Russian SIMs, of these encrypted SIMs? And what do we know any of the techniques that they're using to kind of circumvent this technology?
Yeah, they're definitely aware of it. I mean, the piece opens with this person phoning me up and saying, hey, do you provide information to the National Crime Agency, which is basically the UK's version of the FBI, right? And I said, no, obviously as a journalist, I don't do that. But it obviously shows that some of the people selling these tools are concerned about law enforcement. So then I did speak to the NCA itself, and they said, yes, they've seized these so-called Russian SIMs when they have arrested suspects. They didn't say, we arrested the people because of the SIMs. It was more that during an investigation of a crime, criminals were using it, and then they picked them up as well. So law enforcement are definitely on it. This was not what was told to me by the agency, but I would speculate that these SIMs, and this sort of comes up later on in the piece, these SIMs may not be as bulletproof or secure as the criminals make them out to be. And if I'm a law enforcement agency and I know that criminals are sourcing their SIM cards from one particular provider, I'm going to keep a very close eye on that provider without necessarily shutting it down straight away. I mean, whenever you connect to a phone network, there's metadata on what tower you're using, the call you're making, all of this other sort of very valuable information to law enforcement. If I was investigating an organized crime gang and I knew they were using these Russian SIMs, I wouldn't maybe shut it down immediately. And I think it may be a double-edged sword where, yes, sure, you could spoof your number, you could, mask your voice with a SIM card, but this could also help identify you to law enforcement as well, potentially.
And Jason, you said you had a question?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. So you mentioned just now the source that kind of spawned the article to begin with. And then you also mentioned the article that this source that reached out to you kind of gave you access, gave you information on these cards and everything. What was... I'm just curious what their intention was if they actively sell these, as you mentioned they do through their own marketplace. What is their intention on kind of alerting this, making this more of like a known thing? Because otherwise, maybe it sits beneath the radar a little bit more than it does now that it's kind of exposed or out there more explicitly.
Sure, yeah, of course, as you suggest, all sources have motivations, whatever they may be, to maybe get some publicity, potentially through a journalist. Obviously, that's not my intention, but it could be a side effect. Or maybe they want to screw over a competitor if they give up some other information. At least in this case, because we always put out a call for tips. Hey, if you have more information related to this industry or whatever, please get in touch. We would just love to chat to you. This person reached out and they just seemed like they wanted to talk about this sort of stuff. It was only later when I started asking very specific questions like, so how exactly technically does this SIM card work? They kind of stopped wanting to answer my questions. So I don't think it was necessarily to get a load of publicity. It felt like they honestly just wanted to talk about it. Maybe they were a bit of a fellow geek who wanted to chat telecom security. I don't know whether they regretted it or not, but sometimes sources just want to do that, But yeah, this person wouldn't answer all of my questions. So I don't think it was, straight up, let's talk to a journalist to get PR sort of thing. I think there were reservations about it, actually.
Yeah. So one of the other questions that I wanted to touch on, or one of the points that you kind of talk about in the article, and you briefly mentioned it there, it's just the overall idea that maybe this technology or this method is not as anonymous and as sort of Loctite as it seems to be, because you talk about ways that law enforcement currently use, or the government uses, to track individuals. And it may be that the SIM doesn't give what is actually being said via text messages on the phone and between that phone and another phone, but that location information can still be gathered from the device, and that comes from the fact that cell phones got a cell phone, so to speak. So can you touch on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, sure. So, whenever you use a phone, it is constantly communicating with cell phone towers around it. Let's say I'm on, T-Mobile network or whatever, but I'm just near a bunch of Verizon towers. It's still going to connect somewhat, and it's still going to triangulate my position based on the 3 or the several closest towers. And it just does this, as you say, in virtue of being a cell phone. The cell phone network has to know where to send text messages, where to route calls as well. And just by joining that network, you are giving up that information. This is why some criminals, or, even much more high profile people like terrorist leaders, simply will not use phones because it gives away that sort of location. And yes, you may have one of these SIMs that could do sort of these interesting or novel things in very particular circumstances, but simply in virtue of having a SIM card, of connecting to a network, you are still going to be generating some sort of information in the process. This is why intelligence agencies will be very strict on, don't ever have this phone at your home, for instance, because then another intelligence agency could identify you or find out where you live. Obviously, it depends who you are and who your adversary is, be that a nation state or whoever it may be. But for individual privacy, it can still be an issue. We reported a while ago that, AT&T and Sprint and T-Mobile were selling the phone location data of ordinary people. That has now stopped. But it does show that the phone network is sort of this forgotten relic that never really got fixed, and everyone kind of moved over to the internet and then forgot about SS7 networks and the phone networks, and we're still dealing with the same issues that we were 10, 20 years ago.
Joseph Cox, I want to thank you so much for this article. I think it's super fascinating, and folks should go and check it out, read more about it, and subscribe to the cybersecurity podcast, Cyber, as well. If folks want to follow you online, where can they go to do so?
Yeah, thank you for the cyber shout out. I appreciate that, actually. So my Twitter is Joseph F. Cox, and then there are other details there, or just motherboard.vice.com is our main tech URL.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Take it easy.
All right, up next, the App Store payment processing mobile gaming battle continues. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV. You need all forms of training when entering a new field, and IT Pro TV makes sure you'll have it all when learning IT. Their instructors make learning IT entertaining. IT Pro TV also provides you with virtual labs, so you have the ability to try out the skills you've learned. You won't have to purchase expensive hardware or deal with setup. You can run your virtual machine with multiple instances of Windows Server and desktop clients on your Mac OS, Linux, iOS device, and of course, your Windows platform. IT Pro TV gives you the opportunity to truly be ready for your IT certification tests with their practice tests. Get ready for exam questions covering Microsoft, CompTIA, EC Council, PMI, and many more. With IT Pro TV, you also have the opportunity to supplement your education with webinars featuring hot topics in the tech world, as well as events and podcasts. Check out their podcast Technado with Don Pizzette, featuring industry guests and IT news news recaps. IT Pro TV makes sure you have a well-rounded education that will set you up for success in your future IT career. With more than 5,800 hours of IT training, IT Pro TV is the best place to go for getting started or expanding your IT career. You can earn certificates in A+, CCNP, and so many more, including CompTIA. IT Pro TV is also the official video training partner for CompTIA and has 12 CompTIA on-demand courses. Take courses for networking skills or security skills, Linux, Apple, and more. Sign up for a premium membership and let an expert guide you with setting goals and implementing an IT training program to help you reach them. And August is IT Pro TV's DevOps month. They'll have a free Python weekend where 5 Python courses will be available at no cost. I know that's where I'm going to go check it out. I can't wait. Invest in yourself and your future with IT Pro TV. Get the IT training you need from the experts. Go to itpro.tv/TNW and use code TNW30 to receive 30% off all consumer subscriptions. That's itpro.tv/TNW and use the code TNW30 for an additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription. IT Pro TV. Build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey. Thanks so much to IT Pro TV for sponsoring Tech News Weekly. And now it's time for a battle.
Oh, yeah. Come on. It's the Macho Man Randy Savage. No, it's not. This is totally different. Sorry.
I was looking around for something that I could battle with, and the only thing I have near me is an Apple Pencil, and I just don't think that's good to battle anyone with. But the pencil is mightier than the sword, by golly.
There we go. It's a technology weapon. There you go. The epic battle of Fortnite. It rages on in the mobile app stores. That is Apple's App Store and Google's Play Store, where Fortnite. Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm happy we got there before the end of the second sentence. Fortnite is officially offered to players through these stores, of course. Although I'll talk about in a minute how that hasn't always been the case. But Epic has consistently been pretty vocal about pushing back on mobile app store agreements because they take a deep cut of any revenue that's generated through the apps that are presented there. All developers have had to kind of manage this, right? The Play Store and the App Store both take 30% of all revenue generated inside of the app. That's just the way it is. But Epic doesn't like that. I'm sure a lot of developers don't like that. The difference here is that Epic is of a size and influence that it might actually be able to make changes around that. Or are they being greedy? These are like the opposite sides of the argument here. Fortnite, by the way, is arguably the most popular video game at the moment. 250 million monthly active users. It's just redonkulous how much activity and how much attention this gets on a regular basis. Epic just pushed out a new update to Fortnite, and it seems like it's probably a server-side update. I doubt this was an update that was okayed through the app stores, because if so, then that creates a whole other layer of confusion. But I'm guessing it's a server-side update that brings an alternative way to pay for V-Bucks and other in-app content by bypassing the App Store payment methods. So, for example, if you pay $7.99 for direct payment to Epic, you get 1,000 V-Bucks versus paying $9.99 through the App Store, and then of course they get their 30% cut. Yada yada yada. This would be a direct payment made through PayPal or credit card. Epic says, quote, if Apple and Google lower their fees on payments, Epic will pass along the savings to players. So the question here ends up being, how is Epic able to bypass those fees? These app stores have policies that actually allow them to boot, and they've done this many times, to boot an app or a game that's offering its own payment methods outside of the App Store methods, thereby bypassing the 30% cut. And if it is a server-side push, then that would mean that, Apple and Google never actually saw the change to approve it in the first place. I don't know if we necessarily have Apple and Google commenting on this yet. I guarantee you we will. But I think it's interesting timing right now when you take a look at the size of Epic, the influence of the amount of people playing Fortnite, and just kind of the importance of that game in general in gaming right now. And that concurrently lined up with Apple and Google kind of facing continually facing antitrust allegations and everything. This almost feels like Epic saying, all right, bring it on. Come on. What you going to do? Let's see what happens. And I just think it's an interesting battle royale that's about to happen.
What's doubly interesting to me is that this pairs with a decision that was just made, I think it was yesterday, on iOS. Well, no, it would have been yesterday then. Man, my days just run together. On Tuesday, on iOS Today, thank you, we covered a new service from SetApp. So SetApp, you can just go to setapp.com, SETAPP.com. But SetApp has been this subscription service available on the Mac for a long time, and they just launched an iOS version. And essentially what it has done is if you pay for the subscription service, you download an app from the iOS App Store that has the basic features there, but not the full featured app. And with the subscription, you go on your Mac, you launch SetApp, you open up the app, a QR code pops up, you scan the QR code from within the app on your phone, and it unlocks the full version of the app. That bypasses Apple's payment grab, the 30% cut that Apple gets for processing payments for like subscription services and things like that. That leads me to believe that this is not going to be around for a while. And I just keep seeing all these instances of different companies kind of seeing what they can do, and they're passing app review. So what does Apple say about that? I mean, you got through app review. You allowed these apps to get through app review and be approved to be sold in the store. So what does that mean? Does that mean that you're going to have to go against the ruling that you allegedly had already made? And frankly, my biggest concern with all of this is there seem to be that on their own, all of these little blips on the radar don't add up to much. But when a company is already being heavily focused on for antitrust concerns, and you start to look at all these blips and how there can be arguments made about them all involving antitrust issues, that's where it's worrisome to me. Because I think that as this continues to happen, Apple may face a reckoning. And honestly, there's a big part of me that feels like that is a reasonable thing to have happen, that it faces a reckoning. I mean, I think that some of the future of gaming is streaming. And the future of different apps and services kind of existing in their places and being able to, if it's this money thing in this case, where you get a bunch of different bucks and you get to spend them on stuff, hampering the ability for people to enjoy the games that they play on their devices, I don't think is a good look. And so it's all. I look at it with fascination as a person who doesn't play any of these games and doesn't know much about how they all work, and more from a place of fascination of going, of fascination and consternation, because I want Apple to not make the wrong decision in these things.
Yeah, it really does seem like a situation where it sends very mixed signals. Certain developers are like, hey, wait a minute, you're not allowing us to do that. Other developers, like Epic, for example, seemingly were able to push this through. Haven't heard a comment from either Apple or Google about it already. So then it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. Did they pull a fast one, or did these companies grant them the ability to do this, whereas other developers are not allowed to do it? And that's shady in and of itself. It's like putting, and then when you talk about the antitrust allegations, the blips that add up to so much, it's almost like putting another log onto the fire, and the fire just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the fire's already pretty darn big right now. So these things just add more fuel to it. I mentioned earlier, not being in the app stores, or at least in the Play Store. Fortnite only appeared in the Play Store very recently. When it launched back in 2018 on Android, Epic specifically held it from the Google Play Store and released it only on their site as a direct download, an installable APK, which is an install file for Android. So you had to really kind of go out of your way to install it on Android. Android, of course, allows you to do that, but in order to do that, you have to kind of open up the security model on your Android device a little bit, and it's probably not the best choice for everyone to do that. So there are some inherent risks with it. Epic felt that the risks that were associated with that were worth the fact that in this way they still controlled their destiny, at least as far as Android devices were concerned. Ultimately, this April they acquiesced and they more or less put out a statement and said, look, the reason that we're back is because Google makes it impossible for developers like us to do what we did, right? Like, yes, we can offer it and yes, you can download it, but every step of the way the OS is telling you, hey, this file is probably unsafe, and doing all of these things that again kind of tie back into this antitrust kind of cloud that's swirling over Google to say, hey, it's really using everything in its ability, they would say, to protect the users, but from the developer's perspective, it really seems like they're using their power to say, hey, you can't do anything else. You can't do anything safely unless you're doing it through us, and therefore we get the 30% cut. So it's
live update here. Live update. Mark Gurman has tweeted, Epic's Fortnite has been removed from the App Store after they implemented direct payments circumventing Apple's 30% cut.
Okay.
Oh,
right,
my.
Dun.
I don't like it.
So then does this trigger a kind of like a domino effect, at least on this portion of the antitrust discussion? Because that's an interesting avenue to explore. I'm sure Google is probably right behind. They're probably both unified in this. If it truly is, going against their rules behind the scenes, then I would almost bet that Google's going to do the same thing. So, once again, an interesting story to follow, and the wider arc will be to see how this plays into this bigger story of antitrust, and does it make more of a case for some of the charges there.
Wow.
Yeah, we will see.
What an interest. Again, I watch with interest. That's what I do.
I'm very happy that we got the live update right now instead of finishing the show and 5 minutes later finding it, because now at least the arc of the story at this point, and it's not like 5 minutes later, oh, we're already outdated, which in the world of podcast happens pretty often. So we missed it this time. That's it for this show. Tech News Weekly publishes every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That's where you can go to subscribe to the show in whatever podcatcher you choose. Also, you can link out to YouTube and subscribe to it there. Most people seem to subscribe to the podcast, though, through podcatchers. So find it, twit.tv/TNW.
You can also follow us on social media. It's at Twit on Twitter, at twit.tv on Instagram, at Twit Talk on TikTok. If you want to tweet at me, I'm at Mikah Sargent on pretty much all of the social media networks, actually, so you can follow me there. And I also do Hands on iOS, so you can check out that show. This week I'm talking, if you've got an Apple Watch and you want to learn more about it, check out today's episode that'll publish later today, because I go in depth with Control Center on Apple Watch. There's a lot to learn and a lot to take control of, so you definitely want to see this episode. What about you, Jason?
Nice. At Jason Howell on Twitter, twit.tv/HOA for Hands on Android. And this week's episode just went up. Last week I did an episode on reminders on Android. And then soon after I finished producing the episode, Google announced a new feature called Family Bell that we've totally been loving in this house, as far as like a nice alerting system to keep you on track that integrates with Google Home and smart display devices. So this week's episode that just went up is a focus on Family Bell. Don't let the name scare you. This is not only about like family management or anything. It's useful for everyone. It's just designed with distance learning in mind, but it's a really useful feature. twit.tv/HOA. Big thanks to John, Ashley, TD, and behind the scenes producer of this show. Also does Hands on Android and Hands on iOS. So thank you, John. You're always so busy and we appreciate you. Thanks to Jeff at the studio, Burke, everyone who helps in the studio. And thanks to you for watching and listening each and every week. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Be sure to check out the other shows on the network, like my other show, Hands on Wellness. I love to share different tips and tricks that's going to help you get a better grasp on your personal wellness. Just go to twit.tv/how and subscribe now.